Welcome, Ryan. I am thrilled to be talking to you today.
Yeah, thanks, Baiba. I'm excited.
Yes, yes. I'd love for you to start off with telling us a little more about what it is that you're doing right now, and then we can kind of take a look at your journey and how you got here.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So right now, I make furniture. That's the simple way to say it. But there's a lot more to it. There's particular types of furniture that I'm interested in, particular methods and inspirations. So over the course of my life, I think I've drifted toward appreciating like a few high quality things instead of lots of things that are disposable. So I'm not as knowledgeable about like environmentally friendly products, but it's adjacent to that. And so when I started studying furniture design, I really gravitated toward the idea that if we spend a little bit more time and a little bit more money sometimes and a little bit more care with something, we can make something that we can have forever and pass down generations and love for a while, and it'll be timeless aesthetically and functionally and from like quality of craftspersonship, etc. So that's what I try to do, and that's what I like to do. I'll spend weeks creating a table or a chair that I sell to someone, and then the hope is that they can have that for decades and decades and
Mm.
decades.
I love that because, I mean, there's so much disposable everything from furniture to clothes, and it seems like the quality aspect is overlooked or not even important. So often, so when did you study furniture design?
I guess I've kind of been studying it for my whole life. I formally started studying furniture design about 4 or 5 years ago,
Mhm.
but I think it's like anything, like when you really start to learn about any sort of a craft or a field or a skill in depth, I think you'd start to slowly understand that you've known a lot about the component parts of it probably for your whole life.
Mhm.
Like if you were to take a furniture design course tomorrow, I bet a lot of it would be brand new to you, but you'd start to see parts of it that you've actually been really excellent at before. Like maybe it's the planning process, or maybe it's like material selection, and you've actually done a lot of that stuff before. Maybe maybe you studied biology before and you know a lot about trees, and that's a huge part of like understanding what kind of wood to select. But even if it's just skills of like how to run a project, etc., I think that my experience has been a lot of things are new, but a lot of what I'm doing in my career now has been basically a lot of my past lives kind of coming back together and like resurfacing themselves. And also like helping me notice the things that I have really always been excited and passionate about, but I didn't even know it. And maybe I said no to it because I thought like I'm not a creative person. I think that's a really common theme for a lot of people,
Yep.
which I wish we could just dispel as a community, is that everybody's very, very creative, and you might not be good at like the end part of creativity where you have to put something down on paper and like kind of let it come out to you. But that's just the last step, and that's a skill that you can learn. You can learn how to draw, you can learn how to weld things together, you can learn all these things, but like the creativity is in you already. And I've found that to be true with anyone I've ever met, myself included, although it takes a while to admit it.
Yeah, I can so relate because for years, early on in my career, I heard like someone, a leader, say, "I'm not creative," and I kind of adopted that and kind of parroted it and said the same thing for years. And
Hmm.
then I realized like that's not true at all. Like I started my own podcast, I designed the
Yeah.
logo, and like I love colors and aesthetics. And I was like, what the heck? For like years before I was saying that I'm not creative at all. So I can so relate. And I think it happens to a lot of people. And there's different kind of creativity too, right? It can be visual, it can be ideas, right? Research. So, yeah, I would really invite anybody who's listening, if you ever felt that you're not creative, to maybe challenge that and kind of look at the life you've created so far. And I bet that there is a certain type of creativity, much more than you might even imagine or admit to yourself. So I can so relate. So how did, and I think it's really hard also what you're talking about, how pieces come together, right? This alchemy of the career of how, but we want to know now, how will dots align, and what is that answer? So how did furniture design even come into your thinking, or in your awareness, and even to think about act upon something like that?
It was a little bit of just a gravitational pull for me that eventually I needed to just admit I was excited about furniture design. Um, when I was a little boy, my mother worked at a place called the Graham Foundation for Advanced Studies in the Fine Arts is the full name, but it's a institute in Chicago where I grew up, whose basic purpose is to exist as a nonprofit and give grants to artists, mostly architects, although they've broadened a lot over the years. So my mother has worked there for her entire life doing grants management. And when I was a little boy, we didn't have a lot of babysitters, so I would go to work with her a lot. And I don't know if I was fascinated by it then, but I was definitely fascinated by the building. They're in this amazing, like, old architectural wonder of a building. It's an old home that the inside is just filled with like vaulted ceilings and like cool sculptures, and the woodwork is incredible. There's this big grand staircase. It's like a really fun place to play around as a little boy, and also just to visit. So I think that's like the earliest memory I have of being interested in architecture and design. And then I went to, school for a long time, like we all do in the US, and kind of forgot about it a little bit because I think arts programs are not super prevalent in at least public schools in the US. And so it was suppressed a bit. But, little by little, all these little seeds kept planting themselves. And then eventually, one kind of memory that I remember that made me think I needed to take it seriously. I took a little sabbatical from work and I traveled around a bit, and I ended up meeting some friends, now friends that live in Finland, and I went to visit them, and they were working because they had jobs, and I was just traveling around. So I entertained myself during the day. I went to a design museum in Helsinki, and they had this chair exhibit, and I don't know how long I was there, like hours I spent in these 2 or 3 rooms, just like staring at all these chairs and being fascinated by how they were made, how people were going to sit in them, etc. And that was a moment where all of these little memories, like being a little boy and like, some of like the public art school programs and like all of these things that I had done over the course of my life just kept popping into my head, and like curiosity and just kept rearing its head. And so I think that was a moment where I was like, wow, you should probably pursue this a little bit more. Everybody else was coming in and out of those gallery rooms and,
Mhm.
in like 10 minutes. And here I
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
spending. So I think that was a moment where I was like, hey, you need to just listen to yourself and be honest with what is exciting to you and go follow it. And so, um, over the next following years, that was 6 or 7 years ago. I started taking courses and studying and tinkering a little bit more in like my studio workshop and building things.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
That's amazing. First of all, what came to me is Scandinavian furniture is probably one of the um, most functional. Like they can have really good designs. What I've noted, I'm originally from Latvia, so if you just go a couple countries down from Finland, which
yeah,
you're talking about Helsinki, you end up in Latvia. It's a small country in northeastern Europe, and good quality Scandinavian furniture and some of the European furniture can be really well made. And when I first, when I moved here to US, now it's been more than 20 years, but like I've noticed how much furniture is just like big furniture, but like
mhm,
without the function, and sometimes even without like aesthetics. I know that Scandinavian furniture is more modern and stuff, but like if it's good quality, it's really also well made and functional. I feel like it's much more functional than here, kind of the average in United States. And the second thing is like, I think what you brought up is so important when you feel like something's a mess, or you're not following, or kind of the path you're on is there's some kind of dissatisfaction, is to step away, is to gain that, kind of create that space for
Yeah.
those moments to occur.
Yeah. It's not easy to do though, especially when you're so deep in it, right? I'm thinking
Yes.
about that memory I shared, and I was lucky because I was able to take some time away from work and just kind of explore, and my, mind and spirit and body was all ready for that to kind of happen to me. But if you're if you're grinding away at your current job and or you have family responsibilities or whatever else can happen in your life, it's tough, I think, to take that time to do it. But it's important, my first career was in like consulting, I guess I would call it, and I was studying like retail experiences and human behavior as it relates to like flow of retail stores and purchasing and whatnot. And I got to a point in that career where I was like so over it that I was just super unhappy day to day. And I remember saying, so I shifted out of it, but I remember saying to myself, you can't let this happen again, Ryan. You have to pay attention like earlier on
Mhm.
to the signals that you might be unhappy with whatever you're doing.
Mhm.
And I did a pretty good job of that, but it's tough. It did end up happening again because, to the battle of making yourself self-aware, I mean, it takes a lot out of you, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
like, especially if you're concentrating on other things. So,
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
would say if you're getting to the point where you're listening to this podcast or some of Biba's others, you're probably in a spot where you're thinking about it. So, I hope you take some time to invest that, whether it's just a little bit of a meditative practice or if you can afford to take some time away.
Mhm.
Though everything's better when people are doing the things that they are good at and like to do. If everybody's tied to a career that they've just been in and they're unhappy with, like, it's maybe this is, airy fairy thinking, but I just think that it would be awesome if you could get out of that. And there's probably somebody else that's doing what you would love to do. Can you swap? I know that's not practical,
Yeah.
but the whole world's going to be a little bit better if we can all find where we belong in it.
Oh my God, 100%. So can you share a little more, kind of what's been the difference in your own kind of state of being, in how you feel, like day to day and overall, kind of when you compare a job where you were kind of like what you said, it wasn't the right fit, to what you're doing, how you feel now?
Yeah. I, I think it's worth saying that I don't think I got the right fit wrong, entirely for my last career because there was, let's call it 10 years I spent in digital design, and I loved it for like most of that time. I was super duper happy with it. In fact, I would compare the way that I feel right now with my work to the way that I felt for the first maybe 5 to 7 years of my digital design career. So maybe things come in seasons, and that's a big part of it. But comparing the last couple years of my digital design career to now, it's like night and day. Um,
Mhm.
I We were talking before the recording came on about Sunday scaries. I have a good friend who posts every Friday on her Instagram account. She like reposts this this meme that says "slams laptop shut till Monday," and then in the background is somebody going off and having a good time, which is so real for all of us or many of us, where we're just like, the weekend is it and I'm going to have a great time, and then when Sunday comes I'm going to have to start thinking about what I'm doing for the rest of the week, and maybe I'm not excited about it. That was a big part of my life for a long time. I don't feel that at all now. I think part of that is the freedom of working for myself, so there is no going back to work. I'm kind of almost always working because I love what I'm doing. um, I know it might sound crazy to somebody that's listening to this and hasn't found their thing yet, but I just love every little aspect of what I'm doing, even if it's not drawing and sketching, or if it's not putting something together that I love that I've made. Those are the really exciting, fun parts, along with working with customers and clients that are also excited about it. But I also have to do like bookkeeping, I have to do advertising and things that maybe aren't like super exciting for me, but I don't mind them as much because they've got a purpose behind them.
Mhm.
So it's actually kind of nice to have a little bit of a balance. which may be something that I'm realizing as I speak about it now, that in my careers before, I was always a part of a company, and I
Mhm,
was asked to specialize in something. And it's kind of tough to do the same thing 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. You need a little bit of variety in your life. So now I get to build and I get to design and I get to talk to customers and I get to take little mental breaks and just do bookkeeping or whatnot. And I think that's a healthier way of living. I don't know if we were made to just do the same thing constantly. That's
mhm.
that's kind of tough on our bodies or our minds too.
Yeah, so the ability also to kind of switch it up and go, from one thing to another and change it up. So you were in digital design. Is that like user experience, kind of when we think about websites and kind of the or when you were talking about retail, can you just like tell us a bit more about what it is?
Sure. Well, those are two different careers technically. So the consulting retail experience design was the first one, and that was all about uh, basically optimizing stores. And so I had a market
Physical
research,
stores?
yeah, physical outlet. So like, I'll give a quick example of one of the things that I did. I worked with a computer manufacturer who this was right around the time when Apple stores were becoming a big deal. So that's I'm dating myself because I'm kind of old now, but when they were first coming out, Apple was taking control of the retail experience in a way that was like pretty magical and very Apple-ish, right? And so people would go into the Apple store with the idea of like this is going to be fun. I'm going to try out the newest thing. It's designed super well, and they're going to buy an Apple product. Now, every other computer manufacturer basically had the situation where they were like, we don't have an Apple store, so we can either try to do that, which we'll never recreate it, um, or we can try to influence purchasing in other ways. So, like, what do our displays look like in the store? Do we pay for a bigger footprint inside of Best Buy or Circuit City at the time or whatnot? And we would get down to really minute details of like, move the sign 3 feet to the left, change the font size, put different information on it, et cetera. Essentially, like A/B testing in the physical world to figure out what would lead people to purchases. So that we did a lot of stuff like that that was kind of UX design, but in the physical world. And
Mhm,
then I ended up shifting into UX design in the digital world because it just was a good fit and there was a lot of demand for that at the time. So
mhm,
those are my two separate careers. But yeah, UX design is definitely the right uh, descriptor for what I did for the past 10 years or so. And it was all digital. I did a lot of product design. So a lot of like enterprise products. The last company I worked for was a digital automation company. So we were like, make automating tasks that are repetitive, moving things around spreadsheets, etc. I did some consumer app design when I was at agency. Yeah, all sorts of things.
mhm. Okay, and so I'm just like thinking about two ways to go kind of with this. But maybe
Sure.
let's rewind.
Yeah.
You're middle school, high school. What did you like? What didn't you like? And what did you do after high school?
I think that was probably a pretty good indicator that I was going to have a few different careers and that they'd be creative. I did almost everything in high school except for my homework, which wasn't great. I was I've sat in so many parent teacher conferences when I was a kid where the teacher would say, your son, he seems pretty bright and he seems to be grasping the material, but he's just not doing like the homework, which in my mind was crazy to the idea to be basically repeating something that I had already learned. But anyway, I did lots and lots of different things. So I played a couple sports poorly. I played football and tennis in high school. I did some theater my senior year, which was super fun. I liked performing. I played guitar when I was younger and played in a few bands, and so I would accompany a lot of like the student choirs and ended up just kind of being like a rotating cast member of a lot of that stuff. What else did I do? Basically anything that was available to me. I was just like super curious and loved dipping my toes in lots of different things.
What subjects did you like?
Hmm. It's funny. I didn't like art all that much, which is a shame because I had some really great art teachers. But I think that was just me maybe not thinking that it was the persona that I wanted to project into the world. or maybe thinking that I wasn't going to be good at it. But
Mm,
I was very much like a math and science kid.
yeah.
I excelled at those kinds of things, and then um, probably foolishly ended up studying business administration and marketing in college, which I still to this day don't know why I did that because it doesn't really make any sense. I probably should have continued down maybe the engineering path or something like that. Um, but I ended up just being a big ball of a bunch of different, like jack of all trades, master of none type
Mhm,
thing.
mhm. So you after high school, you decided to go to college.
Hmm.
And how did you pick business administration and marketing?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It's been so long. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I went to a community college first,
Mhm,
which, by the way, I'm a huge fan of community colleges. I think they're one of the best things that American society has to offer because they're so inexpensive and you can just kind of explore and dabble around and see what you like. Um, so I did that basically. My first semester, I remember I took like a logic course, I took a marketing course, I took probably in math. Um, I took philosophy, if I haven't said that yet, and I ended up liking the market, the way that the marketing professor expressed what marketing was, which I think is still true at like the higher levels, the people that are doing it super well, which is understanding people's needs and wants and trying to um, match them up or maybe even inform the people who are creating products or services. Like that's what I loved. And so is that human behavior and understanding aspect that I was really drawn to.
mhm,
So when I transferred into four-year university, I decided to study marketing. But their focus, that was Illinois State University that I went to. Their focus was much more on the sales side of marketing. So I
mhm,
didn't get as much of what I was interested in as I had hoped, um,
mhm.
until my senior year, where I kind of realized that I wasn't getting what I needed. And there was one professor, his name is Dr. Steve Taylor, who was actually doing research
Okay.
into marketing at that time. And I went to him and I said, "Hey, I read your papers, which I'm sure was pretty rare for an undergrad." And I said, they're interesting. And this is kind of what I actually wanted to do. Can I help you? And I think this was my junior year because I remember it was like out of a movie. I think he was trying to scare me away. He's like, "Yeah, maybe. I usually don't work with undergrads, but," and he turned around and behind him he had this giant wall of books, like any good professor does, right? And he pulled a bunch of books off and gave me this stack of books like a foot high. And he's like, "Read these books and then come back in the fall and talk to me, and maybe you can work for me." So I read all the books, which were really interesting. And I came back. I think he didn't expect to ever see me again. But I was like, I read the books, and he quizzed me on them, and then he was like, "Okay, you can do some stuff." So I ran some focus groups for him and did some data analysis and kind of ended up presenting it like I forget what they call it in academia, but like a essentially a conference. Um, and then I was like, that was cool. So I looked for jobs in market research, and that's what led me to that first one.
Okay, is that how you got in the retail experience?
Yeah, it wasn't super easy to find companies that were doing that type of thing.
Okay.
A lot of that I think had moved in house at that point in time. So this was I lived in Chicago at the time, and I found my first job in that retail consumer experience world in San Diego, California. So I actually found it on Craigslist of all things, which is wild because to find a job on Craigslist in this day and age sounds nuts, but that was a reasonable thing back in the day. And
Oh,
I flew out there, moved to California, and then worked for them for about 5 years, doing a lot of like operational stuff until I was able to move into doing the more interesting, researchy type things that were interesting to me.
okay. And then how did the transition to UX design happen?
Well, I became a little bit intellectually bored, I guess, with that world. Um, this is, I think, comes back to the creativity conversation and how really all of us want to be creative, I think, deep inside of us. And for some that's higher toward the surface than others. But eventually I was kind of rinsing and repeating the same project over and over again, even though like the inputs were different. It was still like, how do we sell more stuff inside your store? And sometimes I'm working with the store themselves, sometimes I'm working with the people that put things in the store, but there's basically a formula for figuring that out and optimizing it. And so it became a little bit boring. I was also a little bit disillusioned with, I guess, my role overall in the world as it relates to that. Um, I don't think that it's bad. Like it's not. It wasn't an evil company or anything like that, but it did feel a little bit manipulative. You know,
Mhm,
like if I did a great job at my with one of my clients, they'd sell a lot more than their competitor, and were they necessarily better than their competitor or a better fit for the people?
mhm,
Not maybe not. Maybe we just optimized their signage and figured out the flow and understood like how to get into the consideration set better than their competitors. And so I wasn't crazy about that because it seemed like maybe I wasn't creating things that were helpful for people or, you know, made their lives better. So I wanted to get closer to that.
mhm,
Um, and so that was a time of a lot of searching and looking around and
mhm,
being introspective. I did all sorts of silly things like making lots of lists. I remember talking to almost every friend I had in the world over the course of like 6 months, and when we would be hanging out and be like, hey, what do you think I should do with my life? Like if you didn't, if could do anything in the world, where do you see me? And
mhm,
those people were like, that's a wild question. But eventually I met, or I didn't meet, but I spoke with one of my friends who is a UX researcher. His name's Michael Stahl, and basically said, "It sounds like you do something that's kind of similar to what I do, but
mhm,
you're doing it, in the physical world. And here's what I do." And he described it, and I thought that was cool. Maybe I should look into that. And I liked it because it allowed me, like, doing design
mhm,
meant that I was shaping the things that we were giving to people, and I was actually having an input into making them fit, right? And be helpful and desirable and all the things that we try to make products and services be. So I took a free online course um, from Scott Clemmer, who is he was one of Don Norman's like early, I guess, disciples. Sounds extreme, but he worked with Don Norman, and then on Coursera he made a course just explaining what interaction design was. So I took that for free. I liked it a lot, and then I ended up enrolling in like a certificate program at UCSD in San Diego, and just kept loving it more and more and more, and being fascinated and loving what I kind of like, small impacts I could have on the world by making people's day-to-day experiences better. And so I just decided to go all in, which has been kind of the theme of all of my career transitions. Is I learn a little bit about something, I like it, and then eventually there's a tipping point where it's like, this is it. You got to go and do this now. Um,
mhm.
so I did, and I ended up getting a job at a cool place in San Diego called Mitchell, which was very welcoming to like early career professionals, which I really appreciate. And the rest is basically history. Um, I you've had a long career in talent acquisition,
Yeah,
so I have
recruiting.
one
Uh-huh.
question for you, which is relates to early career professionals. Um, it seems more and more that there's less openness to people that are early in their careers to in lots of different disciplines to actually find a job to just get started. Is that a theme that is real, or am I just seeing that through my lens?
I think there are many inputs that go into it, right? There are like the bigger companies that do have these early career programs, right? And it just depends on how mature they are, how developed they are, how even within the same company, different businesses will hire out of school at different levels or different rates. So it really depends, you know? So it's kind of also how the economy is, right? How many jobs there are, what's the you know, if there's saturation and they can find talent that already has experience, you know, and it also depends on the manager so much, right? What is their openness level, right? Because um many managers are in this mindset of I need somebody who has X years of this exact experience.
Yeah.
And often it's kind of hard to overcome it. But of course it exists, you know, it really depends kind of on the business, on the manager, on the leadership and what they're open
What's
to.
that what's that like working with leaders that have such specific requirements? Because I think that I ran into that a lot when I was hiring, especially when I was doing like team hiring and working with other managers or my direct boss to decide on who, what we needed. It
Mhm.
seems like there's oftentimes an interest to say like, we need somebody with tons of experience, of course, but also they need to know our industry and they need to have created like essentially the competitor's awesome product before. And it's just so specific that not only is it impossible to find, but also if you found that person, I almost think if they're that great, wouldn't they probably want to do something new and a little bit different?
Yeah. Welcome to talent acquisition.
I
It's
don't
probably
envy the people
the
that are
biggest.
that do that. It's a tough, it seems so tough.
Yeah, it's probably one of the it can be one of the biggest frustrations. It's definitely much more fulfilling and fun to work with leaders who, there can be much more of dialogue and kind of volleying the ball of, okay, let's look at what it is that you actually need versus, like you said, experience. Apply all these filters, to the level of an I need Salesforce and this tool, and and then they need to be below the market me. I mean, like it's all comes together to a unicorn, and then your recruiters are running, and it's very then time consuming. So a lot of recruiting is even not even finding the candidate, but working with managers on because many times they're also very stubborn and they want to start that way and they don't want to listen, you know,
Mm,
about kind of how you can really look at the underlying competencies of the role, right? And what makes sense. Do you really need this unicorn, and
yeah.
so a lot of it is really this kind of behavior and psychology and driving, kind of this conversation and partnership with the hiring managers. So yes.
It sounds like those, yeah, I'm sure that's not everyone. I'm sure there's great people to work with too on that side, but seems like that's almost a little bit of a red flag because I don't know that I would want to work with someone who wasn't listening to the person who's essentially the expert in this
Mhm.
area, right? So you, as a talent acquisition person, know all these things that you just described on the surface level to me. I'm sure it goes much deeper, but you hire, say, an engineer or designer to work for that leader, and then I would expect that leader to then defer to like other experts in the business. And if they're not doing that with the TA expert, are they're probably not doing it with the other experts too, which is just that never works out very well, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know what your experience was obviously with user experience design, but like somehow recruiting is one of those things that everybody thinks that they know how to do it. So, they don't are not oftentimes receptive to, like you said, deferring to hey, I've seen this over and over again. This is how it's going to go down, and
Yeah.
this is like how we can actually shorten this process and make it more optimal. But then you just kind of have to tango based on who you have in front of you. There's a lot of
Man, so
psychology.
silly. It's so silly because you should go into a meeting with someone who does something different than you. I
Mhm.
think you
Yeah,
should go into it assuming that they know more than you and they're trying to help you,
yeah,
which oftentimes, yeah, it sounds like that's the opposite. And that's why in consulting, when we would go, to pitch either the end of the project or the beginning to sell, it was always, we always had to have that slide that's like, here's all the things we've done and all the PhDs we have, just so you can trust us, which is so silly because
mhm,
you should just go into it. You've already paid millions of dollars to this consultant or you've hired this TA person for a reason.
yeah,
Listen to them, let them do their job. That's a really common theme, I think, in UX design because it's another thing that a lot of people think they can do because everyone is a user and everyone has experiences,
they
right?
have ideas.
So we've seen that side of it. We must understand how to do it. A lot of the last couple of years of my career, I was moved into like middle management, and a lot of my time was spent basically just fighting for the people on my team to be listened to, the people who are doing the actual design and analysis, and talking to other, you know, product directors or whomever executives who were pushing back on this amazing work that my direct report had done, but just because they liked it another way or they didn't really see the depth of it. And my job was essentially to kind of, you know, get them to understand this
Mm,
person might have less experience in the professional world than you, but they've got way more experience doing this thing.
mhm.
And you need to listen to them. You need to pay attention to them. Um, and when you do, it's great. Everybody's happier. Nobody's arguing. and we're not wasting time. You know, it's the way to run. I'm not saying that we shouldn't debate things. Of course, there's some virtue in that, but I think I'm doing a little therapy session a little bit with you, Viola, right now because that was a big part of what
Mhm.
frustrated me of
Yeah.
working inside of a large company. Is just I think sometimes you get to a point where a lot of the people that you're working with, their their skill that they're the best at is survival and influence in a big company, which is a necessary skill, but
Mhm.
probably not the one we all want. You know, I don't think anybody's ever hired somebody and said, I really want somebody to be good at internal politics. It's like, no, I want somebody to be good at their job, and I would hope those internal politics don't exist.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's definitely, I would say there's dysfunction at every company,
Yeah,
and it's kind of a part of the deal. It's kind of the level, right, to which, and like you said many times, you're just as a leader, team leader, and even individual contributors, it's kind of like you have to have those proof points. You have to like kind of what you said, like this is why if you can influence or you are influencing essentially like how why you should trust and kind of like partner with me or the team sooner, and then you need to have bring this like huge amount of data when you're like, well, I know because we've done it once or twice, but then you almost like have to prove
yeah,
yourself a little bit or your team for them to be able to do their job more effectively or be listened to, quicker. And eventually the company benefits. But so I totally can relate. So, can you tell a little bit more about? You said you liked user experience design for the first 5 to 7 years.
yeah.
Then what happened? What changed?
Well, I guess it correlates a little bit with moving into management. So it might be as simple as that. But I think it also has to do with the same thing that happened in my first career, which was that it became a little bit repetitive and we're doing kind of the same thing over and over again.
Mm.
Um, with different inputs and different results, of course, you know, but I kind of understood how it went. This is maybe just a personal thing, but there's been a theme in my life of getting really good at something but not excellent at it and then getting a little bit bored or maybe realizing that you know the next step of being excellent is like maybe not worth it. I used to tell this anecdote about I was really into rock climbing, like sport rock climbing for a while in my 20s,
Mhm.
and I dedicated myself to it for you know not super seriously, but I was climbing pretty much every day and training for it, and I got up to the point where like some people will laugh at this that are really good at it, but I was climbing like 511s and maybe a 512 every once in a while, which is just like a difficulty rating. And to get to the next step, to climb like even one more rating higher, it was clear to me that that meant like training multiple hours every day and like almost that being my entire life. And I looked at it and I was like, yeah, I don't think that's what I want to do. You know, the same thing happened with music when I was, you know, playing the guitar. I would play in bands, and like the step to being a professional musician was like not something that I wanted to dedicate my entire life to. So I think that probably became true with UX design too. I could see like, yeah, I could continue down this path and become one, you know, a great principal designer, but
Mhm.
I don't know that that's what I want to spend most of my like learning and growing time on. I just like doing new things and interesting things and not being bored at work. So I think it's a combination of yeah boredom. Maybe I should have continued actually designing instead of moving into management. Um, I think looking back at the products I was working on is probably a big thing too. Um, I'd be curious if to hear from your perspective if this is true for all the people that you've worked with, finding jobs for them and fitting them. But you know, the discipline of design is still interesting to me, but I ended up kind of stumbling into enterprise automation products, like not on purpose. I just ended up designing enterprise automation products because of a couple things that happened in my life and jobs I got and offers I got. And I think I wasn't super passionate about the product, but I probably could have been passionate about a different product that I was designing.
Mhm.
Um, do you find that that can be rejuvenating for people, like shifting industries but still doing their job?
That's so funny because I was going to ask you, this is the dilemma, right? A lot of people face that they have this question, um, how do I know do because like you said, let's say you have 10, some people have more than 10 years within a discipline, right? So there's a certain investment of time, right? Effort, your life, um, is do I keep going? Like, what's the right thing to do? Do I keep going, just change the industry, change the company, change the team, change, like you said, the product, right? Change the kind of like, find something that more aligns with, what I feel is purposeful, right? And good for this world, or however you want to phrase it, or do I need to find something completely new? That's a huge dilemma.
Yeah. Do you have the magic answer for them?
Um, Everybody has, like, this is not that's something that somebody else can tell you. So what I found, like, throughout my journey right now, what I do is I help people understand themselves better,
Mhm.
because I mean, part of this whole why so many people are disengaged, right? There's just the dissatisfaction with work is very rampant, right? So, and it's partly stems from people not understanding and not really clearly seeing their natural inborn strengths.
Mm.
And then, the society, the conditioning, the school, from school to um teachers to parents, right? To what you see modeled, to what you see on Instagram, right? There's just so many layers of conditioning that we take on, that we even like hear ourselves in that direction less and less. I kind of loved when you were talking about, the iterations in your career and the different, you know, journeys that you've taken. I interviewed Jeff Brown, who's he has written several books. He's a New York Times best-selling author, but he was in sales before. And pretty grueling, sales and kind of making it work on the day-to-day financial level before he built up to actually, becoming successful and becoming a full-time writer. And he essentially equated that we take different exits along our life, that there is not one purpose for everybody, and that at different stages of life, it's kind of like being on a highway, that we take different exits. And I thought that was brilliant
Yeah.
analogy.
I love that metaphor. I think I would get along with Jeff. It sounds like we've similar perspectives.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was funny because when you asked me, I was actually going to ask you, what would you say to somebody, right, who's at that crossroad questioning, okay, because it's so hard to walk away, right? Something is missing. You feel dissatisfied. You feel bored, like you said. How do you know? What would you say? Do I just say I need to find something new, or I need to change the company, the industry, the product, etc.?
I think I really liked what you hit on because it was similar to what I did. And I did it in on an ongoing fashion, but I spent a lot of time trying to understand myself. And I did that in a variety of ways, just thinking and is one, but also like making lists. I told the story on the other podcast, or that, but there's this simple idea of just writing down the things that you like doing at your job and the things you don't like doing, where I'm like a task level. And my person that introduced me this called them energizers and drainers, and
Mm-mm.
it's amazing how much that can illuminate what you like to do and what you're good at. um, I When I first graduated from college and I was trying to figure out what to do, a family friend of ours had started like a coaching business, and so he gave me as a graduation present a couple sessions, and we did the Strengths Finder book.
Yep.
You know that one?
Yeah, Strength Finders is actually where the energizers versus drainers. It's a popular exercise for Strength Finders too.
Oh, so maybe it came from that. But I took the quiz that's included with that book, and he took me through it. His name's Joe Denner. He's great if you're looking for somebody to do that with. I think he's still doing it. He's in the Chicago area. But the when I look back at the things that were highlighted from that, they totally fit with what I'm doing now, and they totally explain a lot of my career. So I think maybe some people discount stuff like that because we don't want to believe that we can be explained away from a quiz, but there's a lot of insight in that stuff. The biggest strength was ideation, which totally matches with my interest in creativity, and especially how I love the beginning of projects when we're doing like opening exercises and thinking about what could be possible. The second strength was adaptation, which I think very much explains how I'm willing to shift between careers and companies a lot and have different, phases of my life. And I don't remember the other ones, but I'm sure they made sense too. So I would very much, if you haven't done anything like that, I think you got to do something like that, whether it's talking to someone like you that can guide you through it or just reading books. I'm trying to think of the other books that were helpful for me back in that time. I remember reading Emotional Intelligence. I think it's Emotional Intelligence 2.0. It's like an orange and white book. That
Mhm.
was super duper helpful. It's not really about finding yourself, but it helped me to understand maybe some of the challenges around your job when you're working with other people, um, and the ways you can do things differently.
Yeah, yeah, psychology and kind of the growth is not canceled. Even when finding kind of aligned work, yes, it's kind of life's work. Did you explore like applying to other jobs or finding other products to work on?
During this last transition,
Yeah, yeah, before when you were still in UX design.
I explored a lot of things a little bit, but I think I had gotten to the point where I was just so I let it get too far, and I was a little bit too unhappy with like the design tech world that I think shifting to another company at that point or different product would have been just it wouldn't have been enough of a shift for me. So that's my fault for letting it get that far. I did think about that a little bit. The thing that I got closest to doing actually is crazy, but I got really close to opening an ice cream shop
Oh,
uh, in my little downtown Inglewood, which is where I live. The reason that I went down that path was because I was basically like a way of rebelling against the things that I was unhappy with in my life. So I
mhm,
didn't like staring at a computer all day. I didn't like how everything that I did was like bits and ones and zeros. And I
mhm,
didn't like how it wasn't very personal. A lot of these things are kind of the same thing. And I didn't like how I didn't think it was really contributing to community all that much.
mhm,
Last company that I worked for, UiPath, they have, I think, a lot of potential for positive impact on the world. Their basic premise of what they do is that they automate work that is menial, so you can do interesting things. So like that's I think a good thing for the world, right? But I was so many steps removed from that I didn't feel the impact that I was having. So I was searching for something that had a little bit more opportunity for like artistic and personal expression, and
mhm,
also would be bringing a community together and creating like a third place type place, which is something that's become more and more important to me the older that I get. um, and so I went down this path of basically doing that, and I got really really close. I was looking at retail spots, and I had vendors lined up and a whole business plan and everything.
mhm.
um, so that's the thing that I got closest to.
So you were looking for like the transition or exit strategy or what's next. So is that when you went to Finland?
No, the Finland trip was a long time ago, actually. It was before I even moved to Colorado. I think it was 2017.
Okay, okay.
And I actually I went to Peru and hiked around and met some people on like this
Mhm,
multi-day hike that I had done up to Machu Picchu. And then they were from Finland and they were just on vacation. And so I
mhm.
was still had, you know, several months of time off. And so I just ended up visiting them.
Okay, okay. So you kind of also in parallel while you're exploring these other things and working in UX design, you also started to take the furniture design classes?
Yeah. Yeah, I did it. I
Yeah.
did it in parallel. And then
Mhm.
I kind of made the full break a few months ago, this last fall.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that was important. Is for me, I treated furniture design and building as a hobby for a long time, and I was just learning out of creativity or out of curiosity, I should say. And so that was probably 2 or 3 years where I was taking courses and making things, but not selling them and just giving them to friends or putting them in my home or whatnot.
Mhm.
And then eventually I was so wrapped up in it and loved it so much that I decided I need to just break away and do it.
So you tried it out. I think it's brilliant, kind of to when you have when you're in a position, right? When you have these questions, when you feel that dissatisfaction is to um, take the steps towards something.
Yeah, you got to do something. You're never going to know if you don't
Mhm.
take a little bit of action, which
Yeah,
can be scary, but it doesn't have to be huge, right? I took
yeah,
a community college course. That furniture design course, the first one I took back in 2021 was just, I think it cost me like $600, which is not nothing, but for a semester worth of learning, it's a great deal, you
mhm,
know?
mhm.
And also that's another thing that's great about community colleges. And I know I feel like sounds like I'm just, banging the drum for them, but they really are great. Is you can take a community college class, they'll let you take it, and then you can just drop out in the middle if it's not the right thing for you, and that's okay. I
Yeah,
think that's like a really, that's a big thing in tech is, fail fast, don't be afraid to pivot. All these principles of like lean startup that everybody talks about,
beta
those are
test.
true in your life too. You can totally try something out and give it a real try. And if you don't like it or if it's not the right fit, just stop it and go do something else. And that repetitive, like iterative process of just trying and exploring and being honest with yourself and really considering what you loved about it, what you didn't. Like I think that's the only way to find the career that's the right way for you. I don't think you're gonna magically just like have an idea.
Conceptualize.
Maybe there's people like that. I think they call them geniuses, and I'm not one. So I just had to try a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. I love it. So how many hours well, you're working full time. How many hours, over those, few years did you devote to the furniture in parallel? Like every week, would you estimate?
Yeah, I think I could probably calculate pretty easily by thinking about the time I was in the workshop at school. So I would take, usually it was a class that was one evening, so like from 4:30 to 10 once a week. And I was probably in the workshop 2 or 3 more days that week. So six, I don't know, call it like 15 hours or so of actually building things and then some other time like designing and whatnot. So a pretty significant amount of time,
Mhm.
which, that my particular career now is very hands-on and it requires a lot of like doing something that takes a while, like milling up a board and then gluing it up to another board and realizing you did it wrong, and that takes 2 hours when you're first starting out. So I don't know that I would have had to take 15 or 20 hours a week if I was thinking about something else, that was more, digital or more accessible,
Mhm.
but where you could like learn a little bit more quickly. But yeah, it was pretty much most of my leisure time, which maybe sounds daunting to somebody that's thinking about pivoting, but I would say that I kept doing it because it was fun,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So that's a good indicator, I think, of if you're doing the right thing. Do you keep coming back to it, or does it feel like Sunday scaries?
I mean, it sounds like it was like among the energizers, right? And is it the ideation, like the concept and kind of I don't know, do you also draw it out, plan it out, or is it the actual kind of the sensory experience of building that fulfills you most, or is it all of it?
Yeah, it's all of it, which is kind of magical, and I'm really grateful to have found it.
Mhm,
But it all works together, and it's like it's my particular field, and I work a lot with wood, which is really fascinating material because it moves and expands and contracts seasonally, and it's like every piece is different, and the way that you design something and the way that you build it are completely inseparable considerations when you're working with wood, because you could draw something on a piece of paper or even model it in 3D and then go to build it, and it just is impossible to build it that way because of the way that wood is strong and or weak on different axes and different dimensions, or can or cannot be joined that way. So the process for me of designing a piece is, yeah, conceptual and thinking mostly about how it's going to be used, which is a big part of what I love about it. And then sketching it up and then being like, I wonder how I would do that, and probably making a little model. And I make the little model, and then I'm like, that doesn't work. So then I go back to sketching a little bit, and I'm going back and forth
mhm,
between paper and workshop, and also showing to people and getting their feedback. And
mhm,
it's that all that stuff together that's really, really fascinating. And I
Mhm,
love learning too. Like it's cool to make brand new, like things that have never been made before, because
mhm,
every project I've ever done, as far as like physical furniture design and building, I learned something new. And it
mhm.
might just be a little thing, but it's it's something new, and it's different from what I was doing in design, where like the things, yeah, they might be new because it's a slightly different product or whatnot, but it's still kind of lumped into the same process. You know, I learned that I'm just looking at a chair that I made in the corner over there, and about it has this cutout in the middle. It's like an architectural element that I took from a building that was inspiring me at the time. Um, and I learned so much just from doing that about how to produce it, and also how it accidentally turned into a handle for pulling the chair in and out. And I don't know, I just, those things are like, might sound boring to other people, but they're super interesting and fun for me.
That is very cool. So, like, you are taking the classes, you're doing you're starting to build the pieces, kind of to play around with it, like you said, for yourself, for your friends.
Mhm.
When, what was the kind of tipping point where you decided, okay, this is I need to transition to it full time?
I've told this story to a couple people, and I wish I could remember who the person was that said this because it was so impactful in my life. But it was a conversation with someone that I was telling them that I was going to do the ice cream shop because I was disillusioned with my current job and all the reasons I wanted to do the ice cream thing. And they said to me, "Ryan, that's great. I'm happy for you, but it doesn't seem like you're really super passionate about ice cream shops. And there is a thing that you are super passionate about, and that's building and designing furniture. You won't shut up about it. Why don't you just do that?" And I was like, yeah, good point. I think the reason I wasn't thinking about doing it was because it was so important to me and so close to me that I was probably very afraid of failing at it. That was probably why.
Mhm,
But you know, you don't know if you're going to fail at something until you do it. And uh, if you do fail, then you pick up the pieces and figure out if you need to try it again, or if you failed for a reason that's not going to change and you need to do something different, and that's fine. Like
mhm,
that's what we're here to do, is explore and try things and figure them out. That's what I think, at least.
mhm. I love it. And it's a great example. Right. So I work with people on kind of figuring out, right, their strengths, but I work with them not through a test, but it's through a conversation because there's like a specific methodology that I use. But
Mhm.
it's like a great example how, and this is why sometimes tests are not the best indicators of full strengths because we don't see what we don't see. And like even with you, like for an outside person, like why the heck were you hell bent on this ice cream store when you're doing this, you're taking the classes? Like it probably seemed like so clear to that person, but we can get so stuck in our own mud or whatever that we don't
Yeah.
even see it clearly.
It's so true. I think that I believe that people know more about themselves than they're willing to admit. And if you do take time to really like take consult with yourself, you'll discover a lot of things. I mean, that's basically what meditation is in a lot of ways. But it's also needs to be balanced with other people externally looking at you,
Mhm,
right? Whether that's close friends or a professional like you, Viba, that can has been through this before and can help guide you through it. I
mhm.
think balancing those 2 things is that's how you get it. That's how you figure it out.
And I love that you're mentioning community college. It's like coming full circle for me because my son is in high school and he is now the second year of high school. So, and in North Carolina, at least in the county, I don't know if it's a state or a county thing, but they offer that as a junior and senior, you can start selecting community college courses that will be going towards college credit, So if you
Yeah.
want to a 4 year um, school that you can start already earning these credits. But most importantly, I love how what you said is earning the experience because, I mean, so few of them know, right? I mean, it's such a big question being asked at such a young age when
Mhm.
so many 30, 40 plus year olds are still don't know what they want to be when they grow up, it's so much pressure. So I love how yesterday we like just looked at the video, because it's a time to select those courses for next year and kind of understanding how the program works, and
Mhm.
how to select them, what to select. So it's full circle.
What do you with a child who's at that age, what do you think about alternative paths outside of university after high school?
I am questioning the value of kind of this 4-year traditional path and degree a lot. My son is like 15, he going on 16, and he will do what he will do. But the beauty of this is I can see and reflect some of his strengths to
Yeah.
him. Like he's an excellent writer if he applies himself. I know the subject that he like. I mean, the kid loves history. He wanted to buy his own history book. It's kind of like when you talk about these energizers and
Mhm.
things like you know, you don't have to beat him with a stick, like quote unquote, for there's a couple of subjects that he just loves and lights up about. But the interesting thing is you can have the natural talents towards something, but you still have, I'm trying to drill it into him, and it's like blah, 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 is that you still have to have the discipline to do
Mhm.
it, right? So he's a great writer, but if he doesn't show up every day, every other day, right, to write, to practice, to get better at it, I mean, it's a good raw building block, but it's not going to convert into income. So all I can do is to reflect or mirror some of his talents or what I see him being strong at. And then it will be kind of some of his own journey. But the college and this is why I'm also loving the community college idea. And some of it is life experience, you have to be there. You have to go through some things and want to do some things and decide for yourself at the end of the day. So
Is it true that the gap year idea or concept is common in Europe, or is that just something we hear about in the US?
I mean, I grew up in Latvia. I didn't see many people taking a gap year.
Mm,
So
okay.
at least not so much in Eastern Europe. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on academics
Mm.
and, grades. So one of those cultures. I didn't see a lot of kids take, I don't know anybody
I
who
don't
took
know
it.
anybody who did it either, but I feel like I hear about it. Maybe it's just if maybe it's wealthy kids whose parents can afford to support them for a year while they travel around and backpack. I don't know. I love the idea of it, and I love the idea of getting some life experience before you choose
Yeah,
a profession. And I
yeah.
think almost like a rotating trade program or something would be the ideal thing to do right after high school, where you get to experience what day to day is like in lots of trades.
Exactly, because I mean, people go even to medical school, spend like years, right? I mean, you can get a 4-year degree in something, but like some people end up pursuing, advanced degrees just to turn around. And when they practically do it, they hate it.
It's terrifying. Being a doctor or lawyer is terrifying because not only, unless you happen to be quite wealthy, not only does it take forever, and it takes some of like the most exciting years of your life too, but then what if you decide you don't want to do it? Now you have an insane amount of debt. And the only way you can pay that off is by continuing to do the thing that you maybe didn't like in the
Yeah.
first place. It's
Yeah.
terrifying.
So that's why introspection, these conversations, and try things. Like, I love what you were doing, even if you're in a situation where you don't like something, beta test something else and do it. Just don't conceptualize it because it's so easy just to have this idea and possibility and never act on it, but doing the stuff.
Do it. That's why Nike slogan has been around for this long. It's meaningful. Just do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love your story. So, is there anything that I didn't ask, Ryan, that you want to share with anybody else, kind of who's finding themselves in this kind of wondering, questioning, but kind of a murky and a difficult period, of looking for answers?
I would say it sounds like they should talk to you because it sounds like you've been through this a lot and you have a lot to offer to help them. But I would say if you want to talk to me and hear, bounce some ideas off me, I'm always happy to talk to people that are going through these transitions. I did a lot of mentoring when I was in my last career, and I really liked it. And I think it's just good to talk to people. So I'm open for that. I'm going to send you a link to a book that I read that relates to the creativity discussion from earlier.
Okay.
I found it to be a fascinating book. It's written from like a scientific perspective to try to understand creativity, which maybe sounds crazy, but and it's a little bit of a dense read. But I would say specifically if you are someone who feels like their strengths are in non-creative fields and you wish you would be creative, this is a book that you should absolutely read because if you're an analytical person, if you're a math and science person, they talk about creativity in a way that will totally make sense to you and map to the way that you probably are doing your work right now, but it also will open up a lot of what creativity can be for you. So it's a really great book. It's a dense read, but I'll give it to you and maybe you can drop it in the show notes.
Awesome. And I'll also include in the show notes what you sent me. I think there was an Instagram of how people can follow you.
Yeah, that's my favorite place. For what I do is so visual, so I love sharing my work on there. Come follow me.
Awesome. And do you have a website or kind of where people can see what you make?
Yeah, it's humfurniture.com. That's the name of my company. Hum as in HUM, like the first part of humble, the first part of human, like humming a song. There's a lot of
Yeah,
different.
that's what I was thinking. Like, do you sing while you make the furniture?
Yeah, that's a story probably for another time. But the singing or the humming was a little bit of it because one of the things that I do is I make audio furniture, which is like integrated speaker consoles that have like an artistic flair to them. So hum is that audio concept.
Oh, okay, okay. Because like what you sent me, right, is that you're an artist specializing in interactive home furnishings. So what does it really mean? What do you focus on making?
I focus on whatever someone needs and I find interesting, but um, so even something as simple as a chair has a lot of interaction built into it, including like if you're comfortable in it, what its purpose is, all the angles to make you sitting comfortably for the right purpose. But I also am fascinated with lighting and how lighting plays in our world, and how we interact with lighting. There's a big shift towards putting everything on a touch screen as far as interaction right now. Um, but there's also a lot of cool technology that I think could be grasped or like I guess not grasped, but handled differently. So pretty soon, I'm going to be coming out with the interactive home lighting line, which I think will be really fun. It's still in the design and ideation phase, but essentially a ways to control and interact with the lighting in your house that doesn't require you to go to the app on your phone that controls the lights that all these smart lights that we have in our homes. Because I think there's a lot more natural ways to do that. And so that's a little teaser. Hopefully it'll come out soon.
I love it. So it's like really kind of the through line is you're thinking about kind of the user, the
Mhm.
human interaction with whatever you're doing.
Yeah, that's the thread from my last career to this one. There's always a thread, or
Mhm,
many of them.
mhm.
Sure.
Do you think like one was like so you started with a more physical, right, experiences, then you moved to these digital, right, through
Yeah.
UX, and then you're kind of like a full circle back to that tangible sensory aspect.
Yeah, the one difference between the first round of physical and my current round is that I wasn't actually like making
Mhm.
them.
Yeah.
And I was really just advising people on what to do.
Mhm,
And there was almost zero artistic expression. It was all about results. So
mhm,
now I get to come back to the physical world, but I'm designing things that I find, meaningful and interesting and aesthetically attractive and that kind of thing.
mhm. And
But
the
yeah,
kind
in a lot of ways it is full circle. My first job ever was I worked as a laborer on a home remodeling crew and I loved it. And a big part of what I loved about it was the fact that at the end of the day, I would look, I'd pack up my tools and I could look back at what I had just done and it was a new thing was standing there or a different, or it had been changed or like there was a deck that didn't exist before or, beautiful flooring that I'd put in somebody's, kitchen or whatnot. And I love that satisfaction of just like, yeah, it's physical and it's real. And I just think there's another great book that I read by Noah Yuval Harari, I think,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know who you're talking about.
Sapiens.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
read that book, but it's very famous. Yeah.
it's a fascinating book. It talks about all sorts of things, but the uh, it talks a lot about like evolution. And one of the concepts it talks about is that we kind of like we've created technology faster than we could evolve to kind of like use it essentially. And so like just on a physical level, like our eyes are not used to looking at screens. It's weird for us and it does lots of things to us like keep us awake at night. And um we have like these circadian rhythms that our bodies need in order to get good sleep. And yeah, I think that that's very true. And so a lot of the design and building that I do is trying to bring us a little bit closer to what our bodies are and minds are used to doing in a way that still respects and utilizes all the great things that technology has done for us, allowing us to fly across the world or
Mhm.
change lighting or stay up later or listen to music anywhere. um yeah.
Would make it better for like a lot of this technology and even lighting, and it has been developed without kind of including the aspect of or considering the aspect on human biology, which you're talking about, and not necessarily what is good and supportive for us as we are, like you said, still right now in our evolution. And I love that aspect, kind of that you're thinking about it. And I definitely think there could be much more of that. So have you always been handy? Like, do you like doing stuff like when you talk about the remodeling and stuff, like has that also been a through line in your life?
I think it's been a through line through my adult life, but part of the reason I got that job when I like the home remodeling job when I was like 18 or 19 was because I had kind of realized that I didn't know how to do anything with my hands. Like I didn't know how to fix things at all. I lived in apartments growing up or the same apartment growing up. And when something broke, we just called the landlord and they fixed it. And I was like, I should probably know about some of these things. I'm probably going to own a house at some point in my life. And also, it just seems like I should be a little bit like able to do things. So I intentionally chose that job and learned a lot of things. And I'm grateful to Jeff Hammerman of Hammerman Construction for giving me a chance because I knew nothing. But yeah, that was intentional. And then I just kind of liked it. And then I continued through.
Mhm. Because I can kind of relate because I started recently, I started painting, and it's kind of through some of my own reflection and kind of what I felt or what I understood, because it's a journey, like understanding this introspection and building this career and finding more fulfillment, right? I understood that I kind of what you talk about, the visual, that there's something done that you can see is tangible. It's not just like some product on the computer, right? That you shut down, like kind of a virtual world. Like, is it even real? There's something that it does to your psyche. And like
Mhm.
when you see like a painted room that's new, like freshly painted, and I've learned so much about it, about the different paints, and there's just something very, very rewarding in that.
Yeah. Do you share your paintings?
Well, it's paint like it's wall painting.
Oh, yeah. So, like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's not like
interior
art,
design and
like, but
yeah,
it's like literally like painting a room, like picking out the color and then, taking and like it makes your room look totally brand new, like brand new construction, right? And like it makes
yeah,
me so happy.
yeah.
Yeah,
Changing your environment is just so powerful, whether
yeah.
that's painting it or going to a different space. I had a psychedelic experience many years ago, one of my first ever, and it was amazing how, um, that opens up your mind in all sorts of ways that can be cool or scary or whatnot. And just like sitting up a little bit more straight or walking outside can totally change the experience you're having in that state. But it's also true in your day to day, normal state. Like
Mhm.
there was. I'm so bad at remembering the specifics of where I learned things, but oh, you know what? There's a book called Happy, I think it's called, and it's like about studying what happiness is that I read many years ago. And they talked about how changing your environment in really small ways just has a huge, like, has a real effect on like your your brain, basically. And one example they gave was if you have a bad day at work, you should drive home a different way, which
Okay,
is which is so basic, but you see different things and it forces your brain to kind of like notice things, basically. I'm explaining it horribly, but if you're still listening at this point in the podcast and you have a bad day, you should totally drive home a different way and see if you feel better, because I bet you will. It totally works. It's nuts.
I love it. So be creative, mix it up, and I think this whole purpose conversation and finding the right thing can get so heavy and daunting at times that this kind of playing around, like, and just trying stuff, and can you make it more fun, right? Can you make it more
Yeah, play around, because even if you don't find the right thing, your purpose, at least you had fun, and that's pretty
yeah,
good.
you learn something that's not a fit, right? Or you learn something that it's a hobby and you don't want to do it full time, right? Well, I loved connecting, Ryan. Thank you so much for being here. And I definitely encourage anybody to connect with you on Instagram. Again, I'll include the links in the show notes and also check out your website. And thank you so much. It was such a treat to connect with you.
Yeah, thank you too. This was energizing for me for sure. I'm excited about the rest of the day, taking this energy into it.